In this video, I'm going to be discussing a landmine that was created by the Soviet Union at or near the beginning of World War II, called the tmd-b, or as we knew it when I was still in, the tmd Bravo. This is a wooden anti-tank mine that was purposely designed so that it could be manufactured at the front lines or behind the front lines. So it could be manufactured by guerrilla units or partisan units behind German lines. Now, because of the simple construction of this mine, the design for this is one of the designs that was given out by the Soviets after World War II to the different national liberation fronts and communist movements around the world. So this mine has been encountered all over the place. It's been encountered in Central America, South America, Southeast Asia, like Vietnam. It was encountered during the Korean War very heavily. It's been encountered in Africa and the Middle East. It's all over the place. Now, right now, whether you realize it or not, you're actually looking at the mine already in the ground and camouflaged. I will give you some details on it here after I uncover it. Currently, the mine is not armed. It does not have a fuse in it. I'll close in a bit here. Now, the fuse that was used in this was typically an Mv5 pressure fuse. What I came across was this fuse, the Mv5, was the most common fuse used in improvised mines found around the world, and it still is. It's just a simple pressure fuse. Now, I do not have a Mv5 fuse, but I can somewhat explain with this. All it is, you would have your body, there would be a metal cap over it, and the blasting cap coming out the bottom. Now, the way these mines were armed, you had 3 pressure boards on top. Only the center one moved. You also had a little locking board here. They would remove the locking board, open it up, insert their fuse, and it would go down into the explosive underneath. Put their locking board in place, and then it's armed. They would cover it up. Now, according to the information I found on this, it typically took, for an operating pressure on that middle board, between 200 to 500 kilograms, or translated over, no less than 400 pounds of downward pressure. What would happen, the vehicle would roll over this, and the bottom part of this board would snap, or this board would snap, and then this middle board would go down onto the pressure fuse. You had a little piece of wood here to make sure there would be contact with the fuse in case the fuse was a little too low. And this board should be a little bit deeper, or at least the same width as this board. This would come down, activate the fuse, and the mine would explode. Now, a little bit on the construction on these. I'm going to pull this out of the ground and I'm going to open it up. Okay, I deliberately designed this so that I could take it apart. Readjust here for you, get a better picture. Now, some of the technical details on the mine itself. It has a length of a little over 12 inches. I rounded down to 12 inches. The width is a little over 11 inches. I cut it down to 11. And the height of the mine, from the bottom of the mine to, I estimate, the top of the pressure boards, is around 6 1/4 inches. I rounded mine to about 6 1/2. The general construction of it, it was made of 1/2-inch boards, and one location I came across said it was pine boards. So basically it was common lumber that could be found in the area. So you had a half-inch boards on top. Most of the pictures you'll see are 3 boards, or at least 2 boards. So you'd have like a 6-inch board here, 6-inch board here, and then the hole notched out in the center for the fuse. And then you had 1/2-inch boards across the bottom also. 1/2-inch boards here around the center, and these were about, I estimated or figured out, about 4 inches in height. So these together, 1/2-inch, 1/2-inch, 4-inch, came up to about 5 inches in height in this direction. So the pressure boards on top were about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick. There was no real details on a lot of these sites. I had to figure this stuff out on my own looking at pictures. And as you see here, these 1 inch to 1.5 inch boards on top were notched out for that little locking board or pressure board, whatever you want to call it there. It acts as a safety on the mine, keeping the 3 boards together during transport, and then when it's in place it acts as the part of the trigger that, you know, has to be broken, so it's part of the trigger boards. There is a strap typically on one side. Most of the information I came across said that that strap was usually made out of leather, or it could be rope. I just had some old strapping I had available, so I put it on, putting in a few staples in there to hold it in place. Now the total weight of the mine was around 17 pounds. The weight of the explosive inside was around 12 pounds. And the information I found, typically it was TNT or amytal or picric acid. Depending on the type of charge inside, also determined if there was a booster charge inside or if it was just the same explosive across the board. Now we'll open it up here. This whole thing would be nailed together, but for demonstration purposes I'm holding the top on using 4 screws. So I can open it up and show you some of the inside. Now what you see here is about 12 blocks of what would be US 1-pound TNT blocks, and as you see, there would be room for more. When I looked at some of the pictures and drawings of these mines, even in military publications, it showed like 2 bulk explosive charges, one on each side here, with a smaller, maybe half-pound estimated block in the center here, and that was TNT, and that was the booster charge. So you could have, you know, amytal on either side, or the containers of citric acid, ammonium nitrate, whatever was available. But they still had that booster on the inside, which was typically TNT or some higher order explosive to set those off. This board in the center here, this varied. This mine has been manufactured all over the world, and they've used the materials that were available and the techniques that were available. Some of them, the pictures I seen and drawings, had a single board in the center here for holding the fuse in place to keep it from falling over. Some of them, they slid an entire board over the top of the explosive. They had notched out both sides here and just slid a piece in before they put these ends on, locking everything in place. I also came across some pictures where they had, some mines just had like a little bridge here in the center to hold that fuse in place. And some of them, and this is something I noticed in the Korean made ones, the North Korean ones, they use a piece of metal going across here that they fasten to the sides of the mine. Now, this is still being manufactured, okay, actually manufactured in factories. The North Koreans still produce these in large numbers, and I don't have written down the designation for it, but it has been manufactured all over the world. It comes under different names, but it is still essentially just a TMD Bravo, a tmd-b mine. Now, there are some serious limitations with this mine. It's made out of wood. Wood, when it gets wet, it will rot. It'll fall apart. So these mines do not stay in the ground for a long period of time. The wood will degrade, and all you'll be left with is, you know, a couple explosive charges and a fuse floating in the center. One of the ways to try to counter that, they would paint the mines. And from what it looked like in the pictures, it was typically an oil-based paint, so the oil would impregnate the wood a little bit, acting as a little bit of waterproofing. But still, it's a wooden box mine. It's not going to last very long. Not as long as a metallic anti-tank mine or a plastic cased anti-tank mine. Now, huge problems they came across in World War II with these. These boards will swell when they get wet. And what would happen if there wasn't enough gap between the three boards here, the center board and the ones next to it would swell, and it would lock up that center. You could literally have a tank drive over the top and it would not activate because the boards are locked together, they're swelled up. The Soviets improved that, or took care of that problem, in 1944 by updating this to the tmd-44 mine. Tango Mike Delta 44. In that, they eliminated these pressure boards. They just had a piece of wood over here, piece of wood over here to hold the 2 or 3 boards on top together to keep them from coming apart. And then in the center of the mine here, they had a fuse, a bakelite covered fuse from the metallic TM44 anti-tank mine. I've come across pictures when I was trying to find stuff on this. These are still being manufactured in the Ukraine and in separatist regions of Donetsk. And they're using the same general design for the box, for the casing. And instead of using the fuse from a TM44, which is probably not as easy to find now because you're over 70 some years, they're using fuses from a TM62 anti-tank mine. that's most of the basic information I have down in the notebook on this. These are fairly easy to manufacture. This one took me over a day to manufacture, mainly because I was going through my scrap pile of wood, seeing what I had available. I had some wood from an old shelf in the workshop. Well, I want to replace those shelves anyway, so I took one of the boards, which was plywood, chopped that up, got my stuff. I had some bits and pieces of other boards that I cut down for making my pressure boards and my sideboards. So, to emplace this, it was using an E-tool. I have this configured so I could scrape out the bottom, make it a little bit more level. But you dig your hole. First off, you'll go through, you'll make the general outline of the hole, and then you'll slowly peel up the sod and flip it over like I did over there. As you see, my sod block. Then you go through and you get your depth. The height of the ground should be just a little bit over this board here, because you want this raised a little bit above the height of the ground. You arm your mine, you then put your sod over the top, camouflage the edges as best as you can. Now the dirt that came from the hole, that would be put inside sandbags and taken away to another location and dumped. In Vietnam, I got a feeling they were used, the VC, when they put these types of mines in roadways, they would use rice bags, because I seen in some of the videos done by Chu Hoi's VC that came over to the Allied side, they would take rice bags out with them, and they would take the dirt from the roadways, put it in that. So simply use what sacks available. If it would be in grass like this, which is kind of simulating what you would see in World War II with the minefields used in on the Eastern Front, you want to make sure you don't leave too much dirt in the grass, because that's an indicator that something's buried there. It's easier to camouflage this with the sod block in taller grass like this than it would in, say, a shorter grass, because you can take some of the grass around the edges here, rough it up, mix it in with your sod block, kind of weave them together a little bit so it would hide the edges. But that is a Soviet TMD Bravo designed anti-tank mine. This was used in Vietnam. That's one of the reasons why I'm showing this. So those of you that are doing educational programs about the Vietnam War, this goes along with the booby trapping videos. This is something that they could manufacture and use. These were not used as heavily in Vietnam because they're made out of wood, so they're going to rot a lot quicker in a jungle environment. Vietnam, they seem to have gone more towards the manufactured anti-tank mines, so your metallic ones. Or if they put something like this in the ground, they'd probably put a layer of plastic over the top. Now I'll mention this. There were improvements done by guerrillas over the years and by different countries that manufactured these. They eliminated the nails completely. They used wooden dowels and glue to hold it together. They dovetailed the seams here holding these boards together. They would just dovetail this whole thing and put it together and glue it. Instead of using a hinge here, they used a piece of leather, sometimes using very small nails holding it in place, or I came across references of the leather being run into the wood here, onto this pressure board here, and then down here, using wooden dowels to hold it in place and glue. Another variation I came across was some of them would just bore this out going all the way across, put a wooden dowel all the way through it, with the bigger hole being on the pressure board so it keeps swinging. And they would round that bottom edge back here so that you still had the hinge effect. So this can be varied in how many different ways around the world. This is something that's been around for over 70 years. The Soviets came up with this design out of desperation because they did not have many anti-tank mines at the beginning of World War II. And this is still being encountered today. I will try to do some other videos on some of these improvised type mines that were created over the years that have been adopted. Things that were encountered a lot in Vietnam and has also been encountered in other little insurgencies around the world. This is something that could be built inside someone's barn or workshop pretty easily using scrap wood that's available. Now, just like with any other booby trap, do not build one of these for destructive purposes unless it's a without rule of law situation. A complete societal breakdown. Or some type of invasion and you're trying to help defend the area against a foreign invader. But for reenactors or historical purposes, you know, at least you got an idea now looking at it, how it went together, what it looks like. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.